Rejected by his mom, this puppy was raised like a human baby, but nothing about this story is ordinary. A lonely man takes in a fragile newborn shepherd, feeding him, swaddling him, even dressing him in a tiny blue shirt. What starts as a second chance at life quickly spirals into something bigger and far more dangerous. Because the world outside doesn't want this bond to survive, powerful forces will rise against them, armed with secrets, lies, and a hidden agenda no one could have predicted. And when danger finally strikes, the stakes won't just be about keeping a puppy, they'll be about saving lives. How far will one man go to protect the only family he has left, and what will it cost him when the truth finally comes out? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late evening air carried a bone-chilling dampness as Hollis Keene's old pickup truck rumbled past Bishop Randall's highway kennel. His headlights swept across the gravel shoulder, catching something small and dark moving in the weeds. He might have missed it entirely if not for that tiny flutter of movement. Hollis slowed his truck, squinting through the gathering darkness. The shape twitched again. His work-roughened hands tightened on the steering wheel as he pulled over, gravel crunching beneath his tires. Something didn't feel right. Grabbing his flashlight from the glove box, Hollis stepped out into the cool night air. The beam of light bobbed as he walked carefully toward the roadside, his boots crunching on loose stones. There, huddled against a clump of tall grass, was a tiny German Shepherd puppy, so new its eyes weren't even open yet. "Oh Lord," Hollis breathed, dropping to his knees beside the shivering creature. The pup couldn't have been more than a day old, its fur still damp in places. "Who would do this to you, little one?" Without hesitation, Hollis shrugged off his worn flannel shirt, carefully wrapping the trembling puppy. The tiny animal felt ice-cold against his palms, hardly bigger than his two hands put together. His heart ached at how someone could abandon such a helpless being. "Don't you worry," he murmured, cradling the bundle close to his chest as he hurried back to his truck. "I've got you now." The drive home seemed to take forever, though it was barely 10 minutes. Hollis kept the heat on full blast, checking the puppy every few seconds at stop signs. By the time he pulled into his driveway, his mind was racing with everything he'd need. Formula, bottles, blankets. He'd never cared for a newborn puppy before, but he knew he couldn't just leave it to fate. His neighbor Laurel Pike was out on her porch, watering her hanging plants despite the late hour. She looked up as his headlights swept across her house. "Hollis?" she called out, setting down her watering can. "Everything okay?" "Found a puppy," he answered, carefully getting out of the truck with his precious cargo. "Brand new little thing, abandoned by the highway." Laurel hurried over, her practical work boots clomping on the pavement. Her eyes widened when she saw the tiny bundle in his arms. "Oh my goodness, that poor thing needs animal control, Hollis. They have the resources to care for newborns." "No." The word came out firmer than he'd intended. "No, I'm keeping him. He needs someone right now, not a facility." Inside his modest house, Hollis's furniture restoration workshop took up most of the living space. Half-finished chairs and tables lined the walls, the scent of wood polish and varnish hanging in the air. But he headed straight for the kitchen, grabbing a clean dish towel to make a proper nest. "Hollis, be reasonable." Laurel followed him in, her voice gentle but concerned. "Newborn puppies need round-the-clock care, special formula, feeding schedules, temperature monitoring. You've got orders to fill." He was already warming. "Some milk on the stove," remembering something he'd read about puppy care. "Then I'll learn. I'll figure it out." His hands, calloused from years of careful woodworking, were surprisingly gentle as he checked the puppy's temperature against his neck. "He's starting to warm up a little." Laurel watched him for a long moment, then sighed. "At least let me help you get supplies. You'll need proper formula, bottles, heating pads." "Thank you," Hollis said softly, not taking his eyes off the puppy. "I think I'll call him Rook. He's small and dark, like that chess piece." The next few hours became a crash course in newborn puppy care. Laurel made an emergency run to the 24-hour pet store while Hollis kept the puppy warm and stable. He couldn't explain, even to himself, why this felt so important. Maybe it was because he knew what it was like to be overlooked, to be the one nobody chose first. Growing up, he'd always been the quiet kid in the back of the class, the one whose hand-me-down clothes never quite fit right. Even now, his furniture restoration business survived on word of mouth and modest jobs, while flashier shops downtown got all the attention. But his hands knew how to make broken things whole again, how to see the beauty in what others discarded. By midnight, they had a makeshift nursery set up on Hollis's kitchen counter. The puppy, wrapped in soft fleece with a heating pad underneath, was taking tiny amounts of formula from a special bottle. Hollis had never felt such fierce protectiveness as when Rook first latched onto the nipple and began to suckle. "That's it, little guy," he encouraged, watching each drop disappear. "Nice and slow." Laurel, who had stayed to help, pulled out her phone and quietly filmed a few seconds of Hollis burping the puppy just like a baby, holding him against his shoulder and patting ever so gently. The tender scene made her smile, though she didn't tell Hollis she was recording. "You're a natural," she said instead, watching him check Rook's temperature again. Hollis grabbed a scrap piece of wood from his workshop, an offcut from a cherry table he was restoring, and began logging the feeding times and amounts. His precise carpenter's pencil marked each entry carefully. 12:15 a.m. 5 milliliters. Temperature normal. The night stretched on, measured in 2-hour feeding intervals. Hollis didn't even think about sleep, though his eyes burned with exhaustion. Each time Rook took a little more formula, each tiny wiggle and squeaking sound felt like a victory. Dawn was just beginning to pale the kitchen windows when Laurel finally headed home, promising to check back later. Hollis sat in his old armchair, Rook sleeping soundly against his chest, and felt hope unfurling in his heart like a flower reaching for the Sunday. "You and me, we're going to be just fine," he whispered to the sleeping puppy. "Nobody's throwing you away again." In his workshop, half-finished furniture waited for his attention. Bills needed to be paid, orders needed to be filled. But Hollis knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth any sacrifice, worth fighting for against all practical advice. He didn't know that Laurel's innocent video clip was already being shared in local social media groups, capturing hearts with its simple tenderness. He didn't know about the changes coming to his quiet life. All he knew was that this tiny creature needed him, and that was enough. Rook snuffled in his sleep, one tiny paw twitching against Hollis's shirt. Outside, the world was waking up to a new day, but inside this modest house, something profound had already changed. A family had been formed in the night, born not of blood but of choice, of seeing value in what others had cast aside. Hollis adjusted the blanket around Rook, his rough carpenter's hands moving with extraordinary gentleness. The morning light caught the grain of the wooden furniture around them, pieces waiting to be restored to their former beauty. Like them, like Hollis himself, this little pup deserved a chance to become something wonderful. "Welcome home, Rook," he murmured, and in the quiet morning, it felt like a promise, like a beginning, like the most natural thing in the world. The morning sun had barely touched the kitchen window when a sharp knock rattled Hollis's front door. Through the glass, he could see two men, one wearing an expensive charcoal suit that seemed out of place in their small town, the other in a rumpled county inspector's uniform. Hollis opened the door while cradling Rook, who was sleeping peacefully after his morning bottle. The suited man's presence filled the doorway, his broad shoulders and stern expression making Hollis instinctively hold Rook closer. "I'm Bishop Randall, owner of Randall Working K9s," the man announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "That puppy you're holding is my property." He thrust a stack of papers toward Hollis. The county inspector, Clay Danner, stepped forward with a clipboard. "Mr. Keene, I'm here about reports of improper neonatal handling. This is a serious matter." Hollis's heart pounded. "I found him abandoned by the highway. He would have died without care." "That's a valuable breeding line," Randall said, his eyes cold. "We'll be taking custody immediately." "No." The word came out stronger than Hollis expected. "I've been caring for him round the clock. He's thriving." Danner cleared his throat. "Without proper certification for neonatal care, we may have to seize the animal." Hollis felt panic rising but kept his voice steady. "Give me an hour, I'll get veterinary documentation." He called Laurel, who arrived within minutes to watch Rook while he rushed to the vet's office. Doctor. Sarah Chen examined the tiny pup thoroughly, then ran a microchip scanner over his back. That's odd, she murmured, frowning at the display. This chip number doesn't match standard breeding registries. And these numbers. She showed Hollis the screen. They don't follow the usual sequence pattern. Hollis felt a glimmer of hope. Could you document everything? There are people trying to take him. Back at home, he found Laurel had invited the men inside. Randall was pacing impatiently, while Danner sat at the kitchen table, looking uncomfortable. Here's the vet's report, Hollis said, handing over the papers, including the irregular microchip information. Randall's face darkened. Clerical error. The puppy still belongs to my kennel. Just then, Tiny Rook, who had been sleeping in his warming box, suddenly lifted his head. His ears perked forward and he began whining urgently. What's wrong, little one? Laurel moved toward him, then stopped. Does anyone else smell that? They all fell silent. A faint hissing sound became apparent, coming from behind Laurel's stove. Hollis's eyes widened. Gas leak. Everyone out, now. They evacuated quickly, spilling onto the front lawn. Laurel called the gas company while Hollis held Rook, who was still agitated but calming in his arms. The utility workers arrived within minutes, confirming a dangerous leak from a corroded pipe. If that pup hadn't alerted us. Laurel's voice trailed off as she watched the workers repair the line. She turned to Randall and Danner. That puppy just saved our lives. Hollis stood straighter, meeting Randall's gaze. Something's not right here. The microchip numbers don't match your paperwork. And a pup you claim is yours was found half dead by the highway. You're making dangerous accusations, Randall growled, but Hollis saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. No, Hollis said firmly. I'm protecting a vulnerable life that someone threw away, and I'm not stopping until I understand why. Danner shifted uncomfortably, looking between them. The conflict had moved beyond a simple custody dispute. Hollis could feel it in his bones. Something darker lurked behind Randall's claims, and Rook's existence somehow threatened it. We'll be back, Randall said, his voice low and threatening. He turned sharply and strode to his expensive car, Danner hurrying after him. Laurel touched Hollis's arm. You know this isn't over, right? I know. Hollis looked down at Rook, who had fallen asleep against his chest. But neither am I. The gas company workers finished their repairs as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Hollis sat on his porch steps, Rook's tiny body warm against him, and considered how much had changed in just 24 hours. What had started as a simple act of kindness had turned into something bigger, a stand against something that felt fundamentally wrong. You saved us today, little one, he whispered to the sleeping pup. Now it's my turn to save you. The documentation from Dr. Chen lay beside him, the irregular microchip numbers jumping out from the page. Those numbers told a story, one that Bishop Randall clearly didn't want revealed. Hollis knew he'd need every bit of evidence, every ounce of determination to face what was coming. But looking down at Rook's peaceful face, he knew with absolute certainty that it was worth the fight. The knock at Hollis's door came just after sunset. He'd been recording Rook's evening feeding in the worn notebook he now kept by the kitchen counter, marking down 6.2 ounces in careful handwriting. When he opened the door, a woman he didn't recognize stood on his porch, her posture tense but determined. I'm Marlowe Finch, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I used to work for Bishop Randall, and I need to tell you what really happens at that kennel. Hollis studied her. She was younger than him, probably in her late 20s, wearing work clothes that had seen better days. Her hands, like his, showed the marks of someone who worked with animals. He glanced at Laurel, who had been helping with Rook's evening routine, and now stood watching from the kitchen doorway. Come in, Hollis said, stepping aside. Marlowe's story poured out as they sat around Hollis's kitchen table. Rook dozed in his makeshift bed nearby, letting out tiny puppy snores. Her words painted a picture that made Hollis's stomach turn. The breeding program isn't what people think, she explained, twisting her hands in her lap. It's all about quotas. How many puppies we can produce, how fast we can get them ready for sale. The mother dogs. She paused, swallowing hard. They're bred over and over until they're completely worn out. No recovery time, no proper care. Just numbers on a spreadsheet. Laurel reached across the table, placing her steady hand over Marlowe's trembling ones. "Take your time," she said softly. "The runts, like your rook, they're considered disposable, bad for business." Marlowe's voice grew stronger with anger. "Randall has a whole system for getting rid of them quietly. That's why the chip numbers don't match. He's running a shadow operation, falsifying records to hide how many puppies actually come through that kennel." Hollis looked over at Rook, remembering how he'd found him abandoned by the roadside. His heart clenched at the thought of how many others might have met worse fates. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," Marlowe continued. "When I saw that video of you with Rook, how you were caring for him like he mattered, I knew I had to come forward." Laurel, who had been quiet for most of Marlowe's story, spoke up. "This isn't just about one puppy anymore, is it?" Her eyes met Hollis's. "This is about stopping something much bigger." Hollis nodded slowly. "But how?" "Randall's got money, connections. He's got the county inspector in his pocket." "We go higher," Marlowe said firmly. "I kept records during my last months there. Dates, numbers, discrepancies. It's not enough on its own, but with the chip irregularities you found." She leaned forward. "There's someone we should talk to. Assistant District Attorney Briar Holt. She's been trying to build a case against Randall for years, but never had enough evidence." The next morning found them in Briar Holt's office. The ADA was a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s who listened intently as they laid out their case. She examined Marlowe's records, compared them with the chip numbers from Rook's vet visit, and finally looked up with a determined expression. "This could work," she said. "But we need more, much more. If you're willing to help me build this case properly, we might be able to stop Randall for good." "What do we need to do?" Hollis asked. "Document everything," Holt replied. "Every feeding, every weight change, every interaction with Rook. We need to prove you're providing better care than Randall's facility. Marlowe's records show the pattern of abuse, but your situation with Rook could be the key to breaking it open. We'll file to contest the seizure order in county court." Laurel pulled out her phone, already creating a spreadsheet. "We can track everything digitally, keep backup copies." "I'll testify," Marlowe added. "About everything I saw, everything I know." They spent the next hours planning, organizing their approach. Hollis felt something shifting inside him. His private stand for one small life was becoming something larger, something that might help countless others. He looked around at these women who had joined his cause. Laurel with her quiet strength, Marlowe with her brave testimony, and Briar Holt with her legal expertise. Back home that evening, as he prepared Rook's night feeding, Hollis felt both daunted and determined. The notebook where he recorded Rook's care now sat beside Marlowe's damning records from the kennel, and Laurel's detailed new tracking system glowed on her tablet screen. They were building something together, not just a case, but a challenge to a system that treated lives as commodities. "We're really doing this," Laurel said softly, coming to stand beside him as he measured out Rook's formula. "Taking on Randall, changing things." Hollis watched as Rook eagerly accepted his bottle, those bright eyes that had once been so weak now full of life and trust. "We have to," he replied simply. "For all of them." The county courthouse loomed before them, its brick facade catching the morning sunday. Hollis tugged at his collar, the borrowed tie feeling like a noose around his neck. Beside him, Laurel gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, while Marlowe clutched a thick folder of documents to her chest. "Remember," Laurel whispered, "just tell the truth. That's all we need." Inside the hearing room, the air felt thick with tension. Wooden benches creaked as they settled into their seats. Hollis couldn't help but notice how Bishop Randall commanded attention from his position across the aisle, his expensive suit and confident smirk, a stark contrast to Hollis's modest appearance. Assistant District Attorney Briar Holt stood at their table, arranging papers with precise movements. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," she murmured, just loud enough for their small group to hear. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Judge Martha Wilson, a woman with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, took her seat and surveyed the room with practiced neutrality. Regarding the matter of custody for the German Shepherd puppy, designated as Rook, she began. We'll hear opening statements. Breyer stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, we're here to present evidence of inconsistencies in the ownership claim made by Randall Working K9S, as well as demonstrate the exceptional care being provided by Mr. Keene. Randall's attorney, a polished man in an Italian suit, rose smoothly. Your Honor, this is a simple matter of recovering misappropriated property. The puppy in question belongs to my client's legitimate breeding operation. As the hearing progressed, Hollis watched County Inspector Clay Danner slip into the back row, his presence a silent show of support for Randall. The inspector's smug expression made Hollis's stomach turn. Marlowe took the stand first, her hand steady as she opened her notebook. I documented every breeding pair during my employment at Randall Working K9S, she testified. The microchip numbers in question don't match any of our registered dams or sires. Breyer presented the veterinary record showing the chip discrepancy. As you can see, Your Honor, the numbers claimed by Mr. Randall don't align with the actual chip scanned in the puppy. Laurel testified next about the gas leak incident. Rook started whining and pawing at the kitchen cabinet, she explained, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. We might not have noticed the leak for hours if he hadn't alerted us. He saved our lives, and he was just weeks old. Hollis's heart swelled with pride as he described the round-the-clock care he'd provided. He shared his detailed feeding logs, temperature records, and weight measurements. I've documented every ounce of formula, every temperature check, every milestone, he said, spreading his careful notes on the table. Randall's attorney cross-examined each of them sharply, trying to paint Hollis as an unqualified amateur and Marlowe as a disgruntled ex-employee. But their preparation showed. They stuck to facts, to documented evidence. When Randall took the stand, his presence filled the room. We maintain strict breeding standards, he declared. This puppy was part of a registered litter. Mr. Keene is essentially harboring stolen property. The judge listened intently, making notes as both sides presented their cases. When Clay Danner testified about kennel regulations, his answers seemed carefully crafted to support Randall while maintaining a veneer of objectivity. After 4 hours of testimony, Judge Wilson adjusted her glasses. I find myself unable to make an immediate ruling, she announced. While Mr. Keene has demonstrated admirable care for the animal, I require additional verification regarding the chain of custody for these microchip records. I want to see documentation from the chip manufacturer and a complete audit trail. Hollis felt his heart skip. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. They had gained a foothold, however small. As they gathered their materials, Breyer leaned in close. This is good, she whispered. If we can prove those chips were falsified, this becomes much bigger than a custody dispute. We're looking at potential criminal fraud. Outside the courthouse, Randall stood at the top of the steps, his steel-gray eyes locked onto their group. The threat in his stare was unmistakable. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Don't let him intimidate you, Laurel said softly, linking her arm through Hollis's. We're doing the right thing. Marlowe nodded grimly. I still have contacts at other kennels. If there's a pattern of chip manipulation, we'll find it. They walked to their cars together, united in purpose. The morning's hearing had transformed their loose alliance into something stronger, a team committed to exposing the truth, whatever the cost. Document everything, Breyer reminded them as they prepared to leave. Every interaction, every piece of evidence. We've got the judge's attention. Now we need to prove the bigger picture. Hollis thought of Rook waiting at home, growing stronger every day. The puppy's trust and love had started this journey, but now it had become something larger. A fight against a system that valued profit over compassion. The small victory of keeping their case alive felt like the first ray of dawn after a long night. The night air held an unusual stillness when Hollis first smelled smoke. He'd been working late in his workshop, sanding down an antique dresser while Rook dozed in his crate nearby. The acrid scent made him pause, his rough hands going still on the wood. Then came the crackling sound. Rook's warning bark pierced the quiet just as orange flames licked up the stairwell leading to his second-floor workshop. The fire moved impossibly fast, like someone had helped it along. Through the spreading smoke, Hollis caught a glimpse of a dark figure disappearing into the night. Cleet Norwood, one of Randall's known associates. Rook. Hollis shouted, lunging toward the crate as thick smoke began filling the room. The heat was intense, making his eyes water as he fumbled with the latch. Rook whimpered, pressing against his hands as Hollis lifted him out. The stairs were already engulfed. Black smoke rolled across the ceiling in waves, making it hard to breathe or see. Hollis stripped off his flannel jacket, wrapping it securely around Rook's trembling body. The dog trusted him completely, going still in his arms despite the chaos around them. The workshop windows rattled from the growing inferno. Hollis could hear the old building's timber groaning ominously overhead. They had seconds, not minutes. With Rook clutched tightly to his chest, he charged toward the far window, turning his shoulder at the last moment to crash through. The impact of shattering glass was followed by a moment of weightlessness. Then came the brutal landing. Hollis twisted midair to take the brunt of it on his side, protecting Rook. Pain shot through his ribs as they hit the ground hard. Behind them, the workshop's roof collapsed with a thunderous roar, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Distant sirens wailed, growing closer. Hollis lay there, gasping, still holding Rook, who squirmed anxiously in the jacket. Neighbors emerged from their homes, shouting and pointing at the flames. Through the chaos, a man in a suit approached with purposeful steps. "Mr. Keene." The man's voice was clipped, professional. "I'm serving you with an emergency seizure order for the animal in your possession." He thrust a thick envelope into Hollis's shaking hands before disappearing into the gathering crowd. Hollis stared at the papers, then at his burning workshop. The timing wasn't coincidental. Randall had orchestrated this, using the fire as a distraction to serve the order when Hollis was most vulnerable. The sound of approaching fire trucks filled the air as Laurel's car screeched to a halt nearby. "Hollis." She ran to him, face pale in the firelight. "Are you hurt? Is Rook okay?" "We're alive," Hollis managed, wincing as he sat up. Rook poked his nose out of the soot-stained jacket, licking Laurel's hand. "But we can't stay here. You're coming home with me," Laurel said firmly, helping him to his feet. "Both of you." Within an hour, they were at Laurel's house, joined by Marlowe and Briar, who'd come as soon as they'd heard. Hollis sat on Laurel's couch, still holding Rook wrapped in the dirty flannel, while the others reviewed the seizure order. "This is clearly retaliation," Marlowe said, pacing the living room. "But we have to be smart about how we fight back. One wrong move and Randall will use it against us." Briar nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the legal documents. "The fire will actually work in our favor. It shows the lengths they'll go to. But we need to stay within the system. That's how we'll beat them." Laurel brought Hollis an ice pack for his ribs, her touch gentle. "You could have died tonight," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to—" "No." Hollis's voice was quiet but firm. He looked down at Rook, who gazed back with complete trust. "I won't give him up. Not to Randall, not to anyone." He stroked the dog's ears through the sooty flannel. "They tried to kill us tonight rather than let the truth come out. That tells me we're closer than we thought to exposing whatever they're hiding." The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of fire trucks still working at his workshop. The attack had changed everything. What had started as a fight over custody had escalated into something far more dangerous. But looking around at his allies, Laurel's steady presence, Marlowe's fierce determination, Briar's strategic mind, Hollis knew they wouldn't back down. "We'll need to move fast," Briar said, already making notes. "I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. The arson investigation will buy us some time. And I'll dig deeper into those breeding records," Marlowe added. "There has to be something we missed." Laurel squeezed Hollis's shoulder. "You both can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure this out together." Hollis nodded, feeling the weight of Rook's warm body against his chest. The pup had drifted off to sleep, completely at peace despite their narrow escape. Looking down at him, Hollis silently renewed his promise. No matter what Randall threw at them next, he would protect this innocent life he'd chosen to save. The fire had destroyed his workshop, but it had failed to break their resolve. If anything, the attack had only strengthened their determination to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The morning after the fire, Hollis sat at Laurel's kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. His shoulders still ached from the crash through the window, and the smell of smoke clung to his clothes. Rook dozed at his feet, twitching in his sleep. Marlowe paced the room, her work boots making soft thuds against the linoleum. She kept glancing at Hollis, then away, like someone carrying a heavy secret. Finally, she pulled out a chair and sat down, placing her hands flat on the table. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice tight. "Something I should have said sooner, but I was scared, after what happened last night." She swallowed hard. "You need to know the whole truth about Rook." Hollis looked up from his coffee, noting the tension in her face. "What truth?" "Randall's entire operation is built on lies," Marlowe began. "Those mismatched chip numbers? They're not mistakes. They're proof of something much bigger." She took a deep breath. "Randall uses surrogate dams to get around breeding limits. He takes prime females, gets them certified, then uses other dogs as surrogates to carry the puppies. It lets him produce more litters than legally allowed." Laurel, who had been quietly making breakfast, turned from the stove. "That's horrible. Those poor mother dogs." "It gets worse," Marlowe continued. "When puppies don't match the expected markings or size, they're disposed of. No paper trail. Like they never existed." Her voice cracked. "That's what happened to Rook. He wasn't abandoned by accident. He was thrown away on purpose." Hollis felt his chest tighten. He looked down at the sleeping puppy, remembering that cold night by the highway. But why? Why target him so hard now? Because Rook's father is a celebrated federal canine named Thunder's Honor. Championship bloodlines, perfect service record. Randall charges premium prices for his puppies. Marlowe leaned forward. "But Rook's size and markings would expose everything. He doesn't match what that breeding pair should produce. He's living proof of the surrogate scheme." The kitchen fell silent, except for the soft sizzle of bacon on the stove. Hollis reached down to touch Rook's fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "So when they saw that video of me with him," Hollis started. "They panicked," Marlowe finished. "A discarded pup suddenly in the spotlight? They had to either reclaim him or—" She didn't complete the sentence. Laurel set plates of food on the table, but no one moved to eat. "That's why they burned down the workshop," she said quietly. "They're desperate to hide this." Hollis felt anger rising in his chest, but also something else. A fierce pride in how he'd raised Rook. "The way I cared for him, like a human baby, and that created a bond they can't fake." "Exactly," Marlowe said. "No paperwork can match what you two have. But now we need to shift our strategy. This isn't just about keeping Rook anymore. We're talking about criminal fraud, animal cruelty, falsified documents." Hollis watched as Rook stirred, yawned, and padded over to rest his head on Hollis's lap. The puppy's trust was absolute, earned through countless nights of bottle feeding and comfort. "All those mothers," Hollis said softly, "used like machines. And the puppies who didn't make the cut." He stroked Rook's ears. "How many others didn't get found in time?" "I documented everything I could before I left," Marlowe said. "Breeding records, surrogate assignments, dates when puppies disappeared. I was too scared to come forward then. But now?" She squared her shoulders. "We take this to Briar. All of it." Laurel sat down with them, her face determined. "The chip numbers are just the start. If we can prove the whole system, we can shut him down." Hollis finished. The magnitude of what they were facing settled over him. Not just a kennel owner, but a sophisticated breeding fraud that had probably been operating for years. Rook whined softly and pressed closer to Hollis's leg. The puppy's survival, his amazing alertness that had saved them from the gas leak, his unwavering loyalty, all of it felt even more precious now. He wasn't just a rejected runt. He was living proof of a corrupt system that treated life as disposable. "I never wanted a big fight," Hollis said, his voice rough. "Just wanted to save one little life that needed help. But now?" He looked at Marlowe and Laurel. "We take this all the way. For every mother dog they used, every puppy they threw away, Every law they broke thinking nobody would care enough to stop them. Marlo nodded, relief visible on her face at finally sharing her burden. We'll need to move carefully. Randall has connections, influence. But the truth is on our side. And so is Rook, Laurel added softly. Living, breathing proof of everything they did wrong, and everything Hollis did right. The morning sun streamed through Laurel's kitchen windows, warming the room. Outside, the charred remains of Hollis's workshop stood, as a testament to how far Randall would go to protect his secrets. But inside, 3 people and 1 special puppy formed a different kind of strength, one built on compassion, truth, and the unshakable bond between a man and the tiny life he'd refused to let go. The morning after Marlo's revelation, they gathered in Laurel's kitchen. Empty coffee mugs littered the table as Briar Holt spread out documents, her suit jacket draped over a chair. The ADA's normally pristine appearance showed signs of strain. She'd been up most of the night mapping out their strategy. Here's what we need, Briar said, tapping a legal pad with her pen. To get a warrant that will stick, we need 2 things: proof of veterinary steroids being used off books, and those falsified chip logs stored somewhere outside the kennel. Hollis leaned forward, his flannel shirt wrinkled from sleeping in Laurel's spare room. How do we get that without tipping our hand? We bait them, Marlo said quietly. Her eyes held a determined glint. Cleet Norwood handles all the after-hours transfers. He's sloppy when he thinks no one's watching. Laurel poured more coffee, her practical nature asserting itself. But how do we catch him in the act? Briar's smile was sharp. We orchestrate it. A carefully timed anonymous tip about a surprise inspection tomorrow morning. They'll scramble to move anything incriminating tonight. The plan came together over the next few hours. Marlo knew Cleet's patterns, the back routes he took to avoid main roads. Hollis borrowed trail cameras from a hunter friend, positioning them strategically along the likely route. Laurel coordinated from her kitchen table, using her local knowledge to identify the best observation points. As dusk settled, they waited in Laurel's truck, parked where they could monitor the kennel's rear access road. Rook lay quietly in the backseat, his presence a reminder of everything at stake. The puppy had grown stronger over the weeks, his coat glossier and his frame filling out despite his small size. Movement, Marlo whispered, pointing to headlights appearing in the distance. Hollis raised the night vision camera, his hands steady. Through the lens, he watched Cleet's pickup truck emerge, loaded with boxes. The vehicle paused at the access road, then turned toward the old storage facility where Marlo had suspected they kept overflow records. They followed at a distance, capturing every moment. Cleet made 3 trips, growing more careless with each load. On the final run, they clearly filmed him transferring labeled containers and veterinary supplies into a storage unit. Got you, Briar breathed, reviewing the footage on her laptop. She was already typing on her phone, alerting the warrant team standing by. This, combined with Marlo's testimony about the breeding program, it's enough. The raid happened at dawn. Multiple police vehicles converged on both the kennel and the storage facility. Hollis and Laurel watched from a safe distance as officers emerged with boxes of records, computer equipment, and itself. Most damning, containers of unregistered microchips and veterinary drugs. By afternoon, Briar called with news that sent relief flooding through the room. The judge has suspended the seizure order pending investigation of the new evidence. Rook stays with you, Hollis. Laurel's kitchen erupted in celebration. Marlo actually hugged everyone, including Rook, before heading out to provide her official statement. Briar stopped by briefly, looking more relaxed than they'd ever seen her, to drop off copies of the suspended order. As evening settled in, Hollis and Laurel found themselves alone. Rook dozed across Hollis's lap, his small body warm and trusting. The puppy had grown so much since that first desperate night of bottle feeding, yet still maintained his special bond with his unlikely foster father. We might actually win this, Laurel said softly, settling beside them on the couch. Her hand found Hollis's, their fingers intertwining naturally. Hollis looked at her, really looked at her, seeing all the ways she'd stood by him through this crisis. I couldn't have done any of this without you, he said. You've been my anchor since the beginning. Someone had to keep you from tilting at windmills, she teased. but her eyes were soft. "Though I have to admit, your stubborn heart was right about this one." "About Rook?" "About everything." She squeezed his hand. "About standing up for what's right. About not giving up. About—" She paused, gathering courage. "About us." The moment stretched between them, filled with all the unspoken things that had grown during their shared battle. Hollis turned his hand in hers, drawing her closer. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have since you filmed that first video of me burping him like a baby." Laurel's laugh was watery. "I loved you then too. You and your ridiculous determination to save this tiny pup." Rook stirred slightly in his sleep, resettling across both their laps now, bridging them together as he had from the start. Outside, the news of the raid was spreading through town, phones buzzing with updates and speculation. But in this quiet moment, Hollis and Laurel simply held onto each other, their private acknowledgement of love feeling like another kind of victory. The court-mandated kennel visit felt like walking into a trap. Hollis could sense it in the air as he carried Rook through the sterile hallways of Randall working K9S, the court officer trailing behind them. Bishop Randall's smile was too sharp, his eyes calculating as he watched them enter the designated meeting room. "Just a routine inspection," Randall said smoothly, but something in his tone made Hollis's skin crawl. "To ensure proper facilities for the hearing next week." Rook pressed closer to Hollis's chest, unusually tense. The pup had grown more alert to danger since the fire at the workshop, and right now, every muscle in his small body was rigid with warning. The explosion came without warning. A deafening boom shook the building, followed by the screech of fire alarms. Thick smoke began pouring from the adjacent storage area, where Hollis knew the most damaging ledgers were kept. In the chaos that followed, everything happened too fast. The court officer rushed toward the fire. Randall moved with unexpected speed, shoving Hollis hard against a wall. The impact made him lose his grip on Rook. Before Hollis could recover, Randall had snatched the puppy and was already running. "No!" Hollis's shout was lost in the blaring alarms. Sprinklers activated, rain like water streaming down as he scrambled to his feet. By the time he reached the parking lot, Randall's black SUV was peeling out, Rook's frightened barks fading into the distance. Hollis didn't hesitate. He jumped into his truck, ignoring the approaching sirens and the court officer shouting about procedures. His phone rang. "Laurel." "He took Rook," Hollis said, his voice raw. "The fire was a distraction. We're tracking his vehicle now." Laurel's voice was steady, grounding. "Marlowe says he's heading east on River Road. Black Ford Explorer, license plate starting with XRJ. He'll try to re-chip him." Marlowe's voice cut in. "She must be with Laurel. There's an old vet clinic he uses for off-books work, but he has to cross the river training grounds first." Dark clouds were gathering over the river valley, nature matching Hollis's mood. Thunder rolled as he pressed the accelerator, following his gut and the scattered updates from Laurel and Marlowe. They were coordinating with Breyer, who was mobilizing police support, but Hollis knew they couldn't wait for official channels. Every minute Rook spent in Randall's possession increased the risk of permanent separation. Rain began to fall as Hollis approached the river training grounds, fat drops splattering against his windshield. The storm was intensifying, reducing visibility, and turning the dirt access roads to mud. But somewhere ahead, through this tempest, Randall was racing away with Rook, the pup who had become family, who had saved lives, who had brought love and purpose into Hollis's world. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the treacherous path ahead. Hollis gripped the steering wheel tighter, pressing forward into the storm. The peaceful resolution they'd hoped for had shattered like glass, leaving only this desperate chase through the gathering darkness. The fight had become personal again, more dangerous than ever, and Hollis would not stop until he had Rook back safe, or until he had nothing left to give. The rain drummed against the wooden planks of the river training docks, turning everything slick and treacherous. Hollis's boots squeaked as he moved carefully along the wet boards, his heart pounding as he spotted Cleet's broad figure ahead through the curtain of water. Behind Cleet, barely visible in the gloom, sat Randall's truck with its precious cargo, a locked crate that Hollis knew contained Rook. "Give him back," Hollis shouted over the storm's fury, his voice cracking with emotion. "This ends now." Cleet turned, his face twisted in an ugly smirk. Without warning, he charged forward like a bull. Before Hollis could react, Cleet's massive shoulder slammed into his chest. The impact knocked all the air from Hollis's lungs as he went airborne, then plunged into the black, rain-churned water below. The cold hit him like 1,000 needles. Dazed from the impact, Hollis struggled to orient himself in the murky darkness. His waterlogged clothes pulled him down as he fought to find the surface. Through the cloudy water, he caught a glimpse of Randall's truck above, its headlights creating eerie beams through the choppy surface. Then, he saw something that made his heart leap. Movement from the crate in the truck bed. Rook had managed to claw his way free, his small body wriggling through a gap he'd created. Without hesitation, the shepherd puppy dove into the water after Hollis. Hollis's lungs burned for air as he felt himself sinking deeper. His limbs grew heavy, movement sluggish. Just as spots began dancing in his vision, he felt a sharp tug on his jacket. Rook had grabbed hold with his teeth, pulling with all his might. The tiny dog fought against the current, slowly but surely dragging Hollis toward a half-submerged log near the bank. Hollis's head broke the surface and he gasped desperately, coughing up river water as he clung to the rough bark. Rook stayed right beside him, whining softly and nudging his face. In the distance, police sirens wailed, growing closer. Randall's truck engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as he peeled away from the scene. Hollis hauled himself onto the muddy bank, shaking violently from cold and adrenaline. He pulled Rook close, feeling the pup's rapid heartbeat against his chest. "Good boy," he whispered hoarsely. "Such a good, brave boy." As his head cleared, Hollis's mind raced through what he knew about Randall's operation. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. The old railroad tunnel. He'd heard rumors about it being used for secretive transfers, a perfect escape route that connected both sides of the river. That had to be where Randall was headed. With trembling fingers, Hollis pulled out his phone, relieved to find it still working in its waterproof case. He quickly dialed Briar's number. "Hollis, what's happening?" Briar's voice crackled through the speaker. "The tunnel," Hollis said between chattering teeth. "The old rail tunnel by River Point. That's his exit strategy. He's used it before for moving contraband. You need to get units to both ends, now." "On it," Briar replied sharply. "I'm calling it in. Stay safe, Hollis." He could already hear her barking orders to mobilize troopers as she hung up. Hollis struggled to his feet, scooping up Rook. His soaked clothes clung to him as he made his way back to his truck, leaving puddles in the footwell as he climbed in. The parallel to that first night hit him hard as he cranked up the heat. Just like then, he and Rook were fighting impossible odds together. But where he had once saved a tiny, rejected pup from certain death, now Rook had returned the favor, proving their bond went both ways. The memory of those first bottle feedings, the sleepless nights of worry, the pure trust in Rook's eyes, it all came flooding back as he put the truck in gear. His hands shook on the steering wheel as he drove toward the tunnel, but determination burned in his chest. Rook huddled in the passenger seat, his fur still dripping but his eyes alert and focused forward. They had come too far, survived too much, to give up now. The windshield wipers fought against the downpour as Hollis navigated the winding road leading to the tunnel's entrance. The old railroad passage hadn't seen a train in decades, but tonight it would witness the final confrontation in their long struggle against Randall's cruelty and corruption. Thunder crackled overhead as Hollis's headlights cut through the rain toward the abandoned railway tunnel. His clothes still dripped from the river, but adrenaline kept him warm. Up ahead, he spotted Randall's box truck disappearing into the dark mouth of the tunnel. The moment Hollis pulled up to the entrance, he knew something was wrong. Water rushed past his tires, deeper than it should have been. Inside the tunnel, the roar of rushing water echoed off the walls. Randall's truck had stalled halfway through, its headlights cutting weak beams through the spray. The flood was rising fast, already reaching the truck's wheel wells. Hollis could hear Rook barking from inside. "Hang on, boy," Hollis called out, wading through the knee-deep water. Each step was a battle against the current. The cold bit through his already soaked clothes, but he pressed forward. When he reached the truck, he could see Randall frantically trying to restart the engine. The water was rising faster now, reaching the doors. Hollis climbed onto the running board and yanked open the passenger door. Rook's barking grew louder, coming from the cargo area. "Get out!" Hollis shouted at Randall over the roar of water. The whole tunnel's flooding. Randall abandoned the ignition and scrambled into the back. Hollis followed, water now swirling at their waists. The cargo area was stacked with crates, some empty, some containing frightened dogs. Rook's desperate scratching came from a locked crate near the top. Working quickly, Hollis and Randall began cutting open crates and helping dogs climb toward the roof of the truck. The water kept rising, now at their chests. Their breathing echoed in the confined space, punctuated by the sounds of panicked animals and rushing water. Just as Hollis reached Rook's crate, a tremendous groan of metal filled the tunnel. The flood had shifted the truck's position, and a stack of loose steel bars from Randall's cargo came crashing down. Randall slipped in the surging water, crying out as the steel pinned him against the wall of the truck. Hollis hesitated for just a moment. He could leave Randall there, after everything the man had done. Maybe he deserved it. But that wasn't who Hollis was. He'd spent months fighting for what was right, not for revenge. "Hold on," Hollis called out, securing Rook before moving to help Randall. The water was up to their necks now. Working in the cramped space, Hollis leveraged his shoulder against the steel bars, straining until they shifted enough for Randall to slip free. Just then, bright lights pierced the darkness from both ends of the tunnel. State trooper vehicles had arrived, their spotlights creating stark shadows in the flooded space. They were cornered, but they were also saved. As emergency crews helped them evacuate the truck, Randall seemed to deflate. Perhaps it was nearly drowning, or maybe it was Hollis's unexpected mercy, but something inside but him broke. There in the rain, surrounded by flashing lights and rescue workers, he started talking. "The surrogate program was my idea," he admitted, his voice hollow. "We couldn't produce enough puppies to meet demand legally, so we started using surrogate dams. The chip fraud covered our tracks. And the fire." He looked at Hollis. "I ordered Cleet to burn your workshop. I'm sorry." The following weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings. Randall's confession opened up everything. The breeding fraud, the falsified records, the arson. Clay Danner, the county inspector who had enabled it all, resigned in disgrace when the investigation revealed his role. Most importantly, the court awarded full custody of Rook to Hollis. Months later, on a warm afternoon, Hollis sat on his new front porch, too rebuilt after the fire with help from neighbors. Rook, now much larger but still the same sweet soul, dozed contentedly across his lap. The shepherd had grown into a beautiful dog, his once unfashionable markings now just another part of what made him special. Laurel sat close beside them, her shoulder touching Hollis's as she sipped her coffee. The quiet moment felt like a gift after everything they'd been through. Their relationship had grown stronger through the crisis, built on a foundation of trust and shared purpose. "Got my acceptance letter today," Hollis said softly, not wanting to disturb Rook. "For the search and rescue certification program." Laurel smiled, understanding without having to ask. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about honoring the bond that had started it all. That first night when Hollis had chosen to save a tiny, shivering puppy that everyone else had thrown away. The decision to pursue search and rescue training felt right. It was a way to help others while working alongside Rook, turning their unexpected connection into something meaningful for the community. Not for praise or recognition, but because saving each other had become the core of who they were. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the porch, Hollis felt a deep sense of contentment. The family they had built wasn't traditional. A furniture maker, a practical neighbor turned partner, and a shepherd dog who thought he was human, but it was theirs. Through all the struggles, choices, and acts of courage, they had created something beautiful, a life worth keeping. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.